Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Good morning. This week, we're going to resume our journey of walking with Israel through the wilderness as we look into the book of Leviticus. The Parasha this week is called Shmini, meaning eighth. And in this section, it goes from Leviticus 9 all the way to the end of Leviticus 11. Now, if you've ever read this portion of Scripture, or one like it, it's sometimes easy to go on autopilot when we read, right? We're reading the words, but we're not always paying attention to the detail. And this happens when a lot of the content that we're reading is kind of hard to understand. And in our portion here, we're dealing with the dedication of the priests, we're dealing with some sacrifices, we're dealing with the food that Israel was and was not allowed to eat. And we may be wondering, where's the application? We don't often see devotions and sermons based on these portions of Scripture. However, this passage is very important. On the one hand, it shows a major shift in God's relationship with Israel, as we're going to see. Now, God is going to be able to dwell in the midst of his people. But the second thing is that we are faced, you and I, as readers, with a very important question this morning. Are we being responsible with the calling that God has placed on our lives? You see, Parasha Shmini kind of provides us with two paths. We have the path of faithfulness that we're going to see, and then we have the path where we allow ourselves to become careless. So the question is, which one do we choose daily? Now, in our section, it begins in chapter 9, and the priests are being dedicated to the service of God. You see, at this point, Israel, they have their tabernacle, they have their sacrifices, they know what to do, but now we just need the people to do it. And so the priests are being dedicated, set apart so that God could dwell with them. So the priests were told, quarantine, as we're all familiar with, quarantine yourself for 7 days, right? They have to set themselves apart, and then finally, on the 8th day, they come out, and that's where our parasha opens up. Moses goes into the doorway of the tent of meeting. Moses calls them out and says to offer the sacrifice for, quote, today the Lord will appear to you. Imagine the excitement. The priests are essentially given the keys to the Garden of Eden. They're able to have God now once again dwell with them. And you can imagine the excitement in Israel. You know, they say one of the most exciting parts about buying something, you know, whether it's a phone or a tablet or a computer, it's the unboxing. That's what we really love. We love to open it, open the plastic, and see it for the first time. Imagine how Israel felt seeing the priests finally come out from quarantine, and now they're ready to do the sacrifices and bring God's presence. Now, we could look at the priests and we could say, wow, what great responsibility they had. Good for them, right? But it's important to remember the words of 1 Peter, that you and I are also called a royal priesthood, God's own possession, who must be ready to proclaim his glory, to go out and to say that God's presence is with us. We also have a mission. You see, just like the priests, they weren't given a job. They didn't go in, check out, and then say, I'm not taking my work home with me tonight. Right? The priests were not given a job, they were given a lifestyle where their dress, their food, and everything, where they went, all had to be dictated according to God's calling. In the same way, you and I were called not to just come on a Saturday or a Sunday, but as a living sacrifice day in and day out before the Lord. So the question again is, are we being faithful to that calling? At Parasha Shmini, it lays out two paths for us. Leviticus 9, we get the good path. We get the faithful path. This is the one where Aaron, the high priest, he comes out and he listens to the instructions of Moses. He observes everything. He offers a sacrifice. And what happens? The glory of God comes down. It says a fire came out of heaven from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering. And here we see the graciousness of God, that he's dwelling with his people. That's Leviticus 9. Then we get to Leviticus 10, the second path. Here we have the story of Nadab and Abihu. These are two of Aaron's sons. One of them set to be the high priest next. And they go in, except they make the fatal mistake. Instead of following the instructions like Aaron did for Moses, it says that they offered a strange fire which the Lord had not commanded them. Instead of the fire coming down from God and consuming the burnt offering, it says the fire came down and consumed them. Instead of seeing the graciousness of God, we see the justice and the judgment of God. And those are the two paths. Now, what did Nadab and Abihu actually do wrong? There's a lot of commentary on that. Was it that they used a fire that was from the wrong place? Did they use the wrong pans? Were they intoxicated? Is another option. We're not entirely sure. But the main point is that they became careless in their work. They did something they were not supposed to do. And here's the thing, it wasn't an accident. They were well aware. God commanded all the way back in Exodus, do not offer a strange fire on the altar. Also, these two brothers were just helping their father in the previous chapter, doing all the sacrifices. So it wasn't a mistake, but rather they became careless with their calling. And so the danger of being careless is equally applicable to all of us this morning. Nadab, he was set to be the next high priest. He was actually there with the 70 elders when they saw God. He was set for success. But it's a day-to-day decision. It's not because we had a calling years ago. It's a day-to-day decision on which path to follow. So what could we learn from Parasha Shmini this morning? First, we're reminded about the nature of God. On the one hand, God is gracious. God does want to dwell with his people. On the other hand, God is also a God of order. God is also a just God. And God is also a holy God. And we have to remember that that also has repercussions. If you've ever watched The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you have a very famous scene. If you know, this is kind of a Christian work, more or less. And Aslan, the lion, he represents Yeshua, essentially. And before the lion comes, one of the people say, oh my goodness, he's a lion. Is he safe? To which someone replies, safe? He's not safe. He's a lion, but he's good. And that's the same type of idea we have with God. He is a good God, but a holy one. So the first, we remember the nature of God. And the second thing is remember my calling and your calling before the Lord, that we are called to grow in sanctification before God. So again, we have this path, these two choices, a daily choice to live faithfully before the Lord in obedience, or we can let ourselves grow careless with this calling. And so my prayer is for us as a community that we will continue to pursue this calling in faithfulness, to push each other onto holiness, and to better represent the God of Israel with clean hands and a pure heart.